am a certified professional coach through iPEC, graduated through the San Francisco modules here in Emeryville 5 years ago, almost exactly now, which was kind of crazy to suddenly reflect back and realize it's been 5 years of building my practice and building my business since then. And a lot has definitely evolved since I started iPEC, particularly since when I entered the iPEC program, I had no vision of myself actually even coaching. I don't think really full-time professionally, much less running a business, which I was terrified of and hated the idea of, truthfully. I had no interest in running my own business, not an entrepreneurial bone in my body. So when I started the iPEC program, it was just on an intuitive gut hunch, as I know it is for a lot of students who go through the program, that it just felt like a natural fit for me as I started. And the more I went through the program, the more natural it fit and the more natural it felt, rather. And by the time I graduated from the program, I was taking on clients at $50 a session here and there just to see how it felt. And I had actually been doing some nutrition coaching prior to starting iPEC. So I had a little bit of experience working one-on-one with people on what do you want, what's in your way. But iPEC gave me so many, of course, just so many tools and resources to pull from to really understand even better ways to get at why people were doing what they were doing or not doing what they weren't doing, and the psychology of it all. So it has been 5 years now that I've been building my business and coaching practice, which is Maher Coaching. I actually started as Live Well Coaching, as thinking that I was going to be more of a holistic health coach. That had been my background. I came in through teaching yoga and was certified as a nutritionist, and had been doing massage school most recently after leaving a job in Washington, D.C. at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And so I had really shifted gears and thought I was going to go down the health route, and that was the PSIG that I did, was health. And as it turns out, mindfulness has been much more at the core of my work than health per se, than physical health anyway. So I now am working primarily with women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who are really smart and self-aware and successful on paper, but secretly at least a little bit miserable and pretty embarrassed to admit it because they feel like they should really have their act together by now. And so a lot of self-judgment, a lot of self-criticism going on behind the scenes. So I work with women on cultivating self-compassion and really cultivating a greater sense of ease and joy and flow in their lives. And my tagline for my Maher coaching business is actually the freedom of flow. And flow is really at the center of my work and of my sort of life philosophy, that we can really let things be easy. And so that's I'm primarily doing one-on-one work with women right now, and also some leadership development work I've done in behavioral health hospitals around the country. That was a piece that came to me as a really awesome opportunity when I first graduated from iPEC, that let me build a whole different skill set than I ever would have imagined. I never would have thought that I would be doing leadership development coaching, and actually might be traveling to New Mexico to do an in-person training with this hospital in just a few weeks. So you never know where things will take you. And I've learned a lot in terms of leading webinars and doing mastermind coaching with groups of leaders and people that I never would have thought of working with otherwise. So my one-on-one work and that leadership development work is quite distinct. And I actually love the balance of having some different components of the work that I do at this point. Intuition, I have found to be sort of a superpower that I never used to realize I had, and which I think is true for all of us, that we all have this perhaps latent superpower. For some people it's not, they're really out there working this muscle. But for me, I never used to understand that I was an intuitive person. I thought of myself as an intellectual person, and I was living in Washington, D.C. in a very sort of intellectually curious place, and working at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which sounded great on paper, and there were all these interesting people, and I thought maybe I'd get into public affairs or politics or media, PR, communications. Oh, maybe I'll become an independent filmmaker. I thought all these things, they seemed like they should be interesting to me. And I worked for 5 years in that job in my 20s, and the job was just sucking the life out of me. And I felt so inept. I thought, like, why can't I just figure this out? And at the time, hilariously, I was like 28, and I was like, why don't I have it figured out yet? Which in hindsight, of course, is a little bit hilarious to be rushing it. But I think we do that so often. We feel like we should have it all figured out wherever we are on our path. We constantly are so pressurizing the system to say, like, why don't I have it figured out yet? Maybe it should be more yet. Maybe I should be farther along. So I had a lot of that traditional sort of 20-something angst going on in that phase of my life. And what was really lacking in that phase for me was intuition. I didn't know that I had a tool available to me, a mobile tool that was anywhere I went, that was available to me to just tap in and say, oh, this feels right to you and this doesn't. So you can do this and not this. I didn't understand that I could say no to things. I didn't understand that I could say yes to things or create new things to say yes to. I just went along the cookie cutter route that I thought I was supposed to, went to a decent school, had a good education, had good friends, had this nice urban life that I felt like, why am I not more happy than this? And I should be able to figure it out and get it together and just be happy. Darn it. Like, why does this feel so hard? And I kept looking outside myself for, can you tell me what I should do with my life? How about you? What should I do with my life? What should I do with my life? I don't have a sense of purpose. I don't have any passion. Shh, bleep. I was so freaked out that I couldn't figure it out. And of course, the more freaked out I got, the more stuck in the hole I got. But what was becoming clear for me, even in that office job where I was light years away from the kind of work I'm doing now that's so joyful and intuitive and stimulating and energizing for me, is my yoga practice was really deepening. And so some part of me understood that this was something I really wanted to keep saying yes to and diving more deeply into. And it didn't feel threatening because I could do it after work. I could just do a little here or there. Everybody else was starting to do it, so it felt sort of non-risky. And it wasn't, though, until I finally had some synchronicities occur that led me to asking for a month of paid vacation off from my office job in DC to go to Costa Rica and get certified to teach yoga, that everything kind of blew open and my intuition, the lid really came off of everything. And I was like, whoa, this is the kind of lifestyle I want to have. And this is the kind of flow I want to be experiencing in my days and being able to create my days. And I saw all these massage workers and energy healers and teachers and yogis, and they were like out there leading these really fun, adventurous lives. And I was like, hang on, this is possible? Like, you guys get paid to do this stuff? Like, to them, it wasn't a big deal to come do a month of yoga in Costa Rica. They did stuff like this all the time. And I was like, that's what I want. How do I do it? And so I started from there, tapping into my intuition little by little and starting to follow intuitive hits, the sort of breadcrumbs as I think of them, as they started to show up along my path. And of course, the more I paid attention to the breadcrumbs, the more they started to show up. So I got back to my office job and within 2 weeks gave my notice because I realized I have no idea what I'm going to do next with my life, but I know it can't be this. I know I need more joy in my life than this. And I was starting to feel that intuitive inkling that there's something more I can find for myself and bring out of myself, even though I was terrified and had no plan and no money saved and really no idea what I was doing. But I started to follow my intuition from there, which led me to traveling through South America for a while, where I had the thought to move to San Diego for massage school, something that I'd always had an inkling of wanting to do, but never thought it was okay to do it because I had this sense of self-judgment that I should be being productive and should be staying in the good paying, stable job and just going the route that I'd been presented in my life. But the intuition kept whispering a little more loudly all the time as I started to follow it. And it started to really have this positive reinforcement quality where the more I followed my gut, the more the perfect people and resources and things would show up in the perfect ways at the perfect time, the more synchronicities would show up at my doorstep. So it felt like it was feeding me enough to help me trust the process and to start to help me trust myself. So as I trusted myself more from one energetic, intuitive inkling at a time, that led me to massage school, which led me to get certified as a nutritionist, and which eventually led me to doing some nutrition coaching, some weight loss coaching. That was one way that I started working with it. And starting to teach yoga and trusting myself enough to build my yoga communities, even though it was terrifying, and just sort of trusting those hunches just enough that I started to really build this muscle of self-trust and of intuition. And that is really absolutely at the core of what I work with my women on now. I think at the core of everything I do, no matter what we're talking about, in my mind, through my filter and my perspective, it's so much about cultivating self-trust, not just self-awareness, but through self-awareness or mindfulness, non-judgmental, present moment awareness, really cultivating a sense of, I can handle life. I can handle emotions, even the big, hairy, dirty ones, even the really messy stuff. I can handle this. And that sense of self-trust comes with self-friendliness and sort of starting cozy up and buddy up with ourselves instead of beating ourselves up. And we start to really feel like, you know what? Hey, you got this. You know, like, you can handle this, girl. Like, you've done this before. You can do it again. You've started something new before. Remember when we started with 0 yoga students, and within a few months you had, a full class, and within a few years you had, the most popular class in the studio? Like, that's possible for you. It can start from nothing. And so that sense of self-awareness and self-trust and trusting our intuition, to me, that is a real superpower, like I said, for all of us, is that once we trust ourselves and trust life, which to me is really what intuition is about, is trusting life and trusting ourselves and trusting the energy and starting to follow the energy, then life becomes really easy, as in full of ease. Not always E-A-S-Y, but E-A-S-E-Y. Like, it really starts to have a sense of flow and effortlessness to it, sort of almost the sense of like, oh, it feels like things are just showing up in the perfect ways magically for me now. Of course, it's not magic. We're out there planting the seeds every day with our intention and with our attention, and really nurturing and nourishing the seeds that we plant, so that we can help them, encourage them to blossom up into the types of fruits that we want in our lives, and doing the weeding to weed out the seeds and the plants that are getting in the way of what we want. So I really believe that sense of intuition and self-trust really lets us till the soil for everything that we want in our lives to come up almost effortlessly on some level. So that's really at the core of the work that I do with women, and noticing that the more work we do with self-trust, which becomes self-love if we want to go to the extreme of it, but I like to come in through the gateway of self-friendliness or self-care or self-attention, because self-love can feel like, what is that? Like, who even knows what that means? If we're so used to judging ourselves and listening to the gremlin voices, self-love can feel like a pipe dream, like unicorns and rainbows. It's like, that feels like crazy far off for most women who are really driven, type A types, perfectionistic in their minds, feeling like, I don't even know where to start. But noticing like, oh yeah, I can trust myself in these small ways in my days. I think that really builds over time until eventually you start to notice you're actually being really kind to yourself on a whole new level. And that's just the byproduct of the awareness and the intuition cultivation, in my perspective. So paying attention with some genuine kindness and some intention to nourish ourselves on any level has this really immense ripple effect in my experience with clients, that once we just pay attention with a little friendliness to each moment and take care of each moment, that the other moments start to take care of us, and that it gets easy and life becomes fun and life naturally becomes more joyful and with a greater sense of flow in it. So that's what I really, my women that I work with tend to come and saying, I want more joy in my life. I'm feeling stuck, like the energy is feeling stagnant. How do I get things flowing again? And so, of course, we work with pulling out some of the limiting beliefs and some of the gremlin messages and the gales, and really becoming aware of those things, as we all do as coaches, and starting to look at how those messages are serving us or not serving us. And in my work especially, it just has a little more of the self-love component weaved into everything, the self-care, the self-nourishing, the self-compassion. So I do pretty overtly deep dive inner work with people. I really love to work with people who are ready to really dig in and really flush out what's not working in our lives in terms of how we're mistreating ourselves or treating ourselves in ways that don't make sense for us anymore, and really starting to plant some seeds of self-kindness. like I mentioned, when I first started iPEC, I had zero interest in being an entrepreneur or in starting my own business. I even remember that back in the day, in years past, I would say things like, oh, I don't want to own my own X, Y, or Z business. I don't want to, people would be like, oh, do you ever want to open your own yoga studio? When I was teaching yoga, and I would say, heck no, like that seems like way too much work. Like it feels like to run your own business, like I would hear about like this nose to the grindstone 24/7. It's so hard to be an entrepreneur. And I was like, no, thank you. I want more ease in my life than this. I don't want to be working that hard all the time. That would sort of defeat the whole purpose that I had stepped onto this path of more intuition and flow and joy and self-created days and lifestyle. I remember in my yoga teacher training, I started to have this vision of living somewhere near the ocean, being able to surf when I wanted to, being able to do yoga and or meditation in the mornings, and being able to have lunch with friends on like a Wednesday if I wanted. And they seemed a little bit like kind of funny or sort of arbitrary things, like especially like the lunch with friends on a weekday thing seemed like, who cares, like not a big deal. But over time I realized those really were the seeds of the kind of freedom-drenched lifestyle that really works for me and really lets me be my best self, lets me be energized and full of joy and connection, all the things that really matter to me, and which really absolutely is the lifestyle that I'm living now, where I get to create the flow of my days however I want. And that kind of freedom is like mind-blowing to me. But at the time, I thought I had a limiting belief that being an entrepreneur was freedom sucking. I thought that being an entrepreneur would take away my freedom because I would have to work so hard to sustain myself as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. So when I first started coaching, I think in the back of my mind, I had some fantasy that someone was going to come save me or rescue me and sort of bring me on as a full-time but very highly paid coach, even though I would have to do no marketing myself. And, maybe I just won't have to do any of the marketing stuff and I'll just be able to bypass it and I'll just be able to coach, because I just love it so much. I'm sure it'll just all work out, which of course isn't true when it comes down to it. So I think, I've really discovered over the years that the balance between effort and surrender here, the balance between the work and the flow, the hustle and flow balance is very much at the core of this entrepreneurial thing, this running a coaching business. So I used to think of coaching as like, I used to talk about it like, oh, it's this coaching thing that I'm doing. And I had no ownership of this is a business. And I didn't see it as a sustainable business. And I didn't want to have to keep Excel sheets to keep track of my income and expenses. And I was scared of doing taxes around it. And I thought I was going to have to learn all these extreme financial systems and QuickBooks and all these things that felt so boring and overwhelming to me. And I was hearing about traditional networking and marketing. And honestly, it just felt so gross to me. It just felt, I hated it. I'm an introvert by nature, and the idea of going with business cards and shaking hands with nothing against this group of people, but shaking hands with a bunch of like men in suits in their 60s who had never heard of coaching before. It just felt so not me. I hated it, but I tried to force myself to do it, as so many of us do. I know we go and try to pound the pavement, get our name out there and hand out cards and do the traditional networking and marketing routes. And what I've discovered over time is that you don't have to do it that way at all. That marketing can really be in quotes, as in marketing is really just being yourself in the world. As a coach, that's how I see it, and that's how I experience it anyway, that I get more clients from being at a dinner party with friends of friends who I haven't met before. I get as many clients that way as I do through anything else in my life or my work. And that's my favorite way to get clients, is like having a really engaged conversation with a really smart, kind of awesome, kind of badass woman at a dinner table who's feeling, I can sense that she's feeling kind of stuck in her life in some way. Like having a natural conversation like that, it often turns into a client just because it resonates. It's just the energy is resonating. So for me, that's why one of the kind of core mantras I've realized and live by these days is just to let it be easy. Is that the marketing stuff doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be arduous. It doesn't have to feel like work. That now my marketing days, I try to coach in sort of bundles now throughout my week. I used to put clients all over the week. Oh, wherever. You want to be coached at 7 p.m. on a Monday or 8 a.m. on a Friday? Sure. Because I thought, I was coming from this lack perspective like we do when we're first coaching, no problem. But I would just be like, yeah, I should say yes to everything and I should just, not ask for too much. But now I realize that the best thing I can do for myself is bundle my clients. So I maybe have clients on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays and save Mondays and Fridays for whatever else I want to do with them. So often that is a sort of administrative or marketing day where I'll write blog posts or a newsletter or do some quotable images to share on social media, or set up a lunch with someone that I've been meaning to get together with who has some connections or might be a good referral partner for me, who's a holistic nutritionist who works with women who might want to work with a mindfulness coach sometimes. And all these things that feel really fun and natural to me, those are now the marketing pieces that I focus on, or what feels natural to me, what feel authentic to me. So once I finally shoveled out some of these limiting beliefs that owning a business has to be hard, and you can't be spiritual and make money, that's a big one, and that those were the primary. That it has to be hard work. So once I got rid of that limiting belief that it has to be hard work, I was just like, well, what if it doesn't have to be hard? What if I can have as many clients as I want and create the kind of lifestyle that I want and have it feel ease driven? Just what if? And started planting the seeds of that possibility. And that's really what started to manifest, where I'm not saying that I don't work hard. Sometimes I put my nose to the grindstone. I'm about to launch something or share something with a group or, redo a website. And it's like, there's a lot of hours and time and energy that might go into it. But there's still something about it that feels effortless and doesn't feel like work because it's so heart driven. It's so authentically driven. So to put ease at the center and to put joy at the center, like, how can I make this process more joyful for myself? How can I make this process easier on myself? Where is the flow available to me in this process? That really changed everything on the entrepreneurial front for me. If I had one or two sort of nuggets of insight that have really been impactful for me in my process in these 5 years since graduating from iPEC and building my business, I think that those nuggets would definitely be the first, which I've mentioned, I think a lot of times already in this conversation, is to let it be easy, to find ways to create more ease in the process for yourself. So I was lucky enough to work as the ATC out here in San Francisco with mods for the better part of 3 years, actually, which was an amazing experience, which might be one of my nuggets of insight too that came up was to say yes to anything and everything that feels at all like a yes to you at first, because you never know where they might lead. So that was a really terrifying experience for me at first, stepping up in front of new students when I was such a new coach myself. It was really so scary and such an edge. But to say yes to things to follow the energy. If the energy is leading you somewhere, if it feels like, yeah, okay, this feels a little scary, or I'm not sure where it's going to lead, or it doesn't feel like the most logical or practical necessarily, maybe it doesn't make sense logically for my niche that I'm focusing on, but my gut still says, say yes to this, to say yes. So I would say, let it be easy, find ways to create more ease in your process. Follow the energy, which is, again, an intuitive path, is really to just notice, is this a yes for me or is this a no? To really turn inward, plug in, and just follow the energy that feels right to you, because I absolutely believe, in my experience, certainly as a coach especially, that you just can't go wrong when you're genuinely tapped into your intuition. When you're coming from intuition, when you're really plugged into a sense of flow for yourself, you just can't do it wrong. The sense of perfectionism just dissipates. It falls to the background. When you're really just taking care of this moment intuitively and following the energy of this moment and acting from what feels genuinely right to you from within your body, not just your mind, but in an embodied way, that things work out. They just do. So when we say trust the process, which I know is something we hear from iPEC a lot, and sometimes that can feel like, yeah, that sounds great, but really I want to get my website up and I don't have cards yet. And I need more clients because I want to quit my job. And we freak out. And I see this with the new students coming out all the time, just like I felt. Also, this sense of pressure is that anything we can do to depressurize the process is awesome and so important. So for me, that was having a bridge job while I transitioned into full-time coaching. So I worked at a coffee shop through the iPEC program, and then for 3 years, I worked at part-time in a coffee shop, weaning off of those hours until I was there just on weekend mornings to finally go full-time as a coach 3 years in. So for the last 2 years, I've been full-time coaching, and I wanted it to be faster at the time, but really it didn't need to be any faster. It all got me here. So I think to really trust the process and to let it unfold, to let things get their own legs in their own time, to really question, does there have to be such a rush in expanding our practices? Because this is really fierce inner work, getting our coaching practice out into the world. It's like it takes a lot of inner resources and that sense of inner confidence and a sense of capital S self has to be really quite strong to keep putting our vulnerable stuff out into the world, which we're doing as coaches. We're really saying, this is me, take it or leave it. You're going to resonate with my energy and want to work with me or not. And so detaching from that outcome and not having expectations and not feeling rejected, all that jazz, like it's really fierce inner work. It's really not for the faint of heart. So to kind of, to be really gentle with ourselves, I think is so, so, so important in this process, that to be patient with the process and patient with ourselves, and to really trust that if the energy feels on point, if our intuition keeps pointing us in the direction that feels right to us, one step at a time, to not worry about how fast things unfold, to really let them get their legs, to just kind of settle in for the ride, to let the waves come, ride the ups and the downs, and just trust that it's all going to point you in the direction you want to go if you keep taking committed action and trusting the process, finding that balance between sort of effort and the hard work and the surrender or the flow, that you'll get there. It really does unfold. If you are on the right path, and by right, I just mean a path that feels good to you, that feels right to you, and you keep showing up and doing the work that you know intuitively you need to do to keep moving your practice forward, it will move forward. So why worry? What if we just let it unfold without all the stress and anxiety and worry? It's just kind of was a revelation to me that I could stop worrying about the process and just enjoy it instead. And of course, the more I started enjoying it and the less I worried about it, the more ideal clients and opportunities started to come my way.